Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg. As always, here to recap a college basketball tournament, a college basketball season, and to get ready for the offseason. There is really no offseason anymore, Greg, with the transfer portal and coaches changing and all that stuff. But we're going to get to all of it today. First of all, how are you doing, buddy?
Uh, March 27th at 11:51 p.m. I said it has to be said. This tournament has been lackluster thus far. Can you write me a thank you note? Can you say that was after the first night of the Sweet 16? So you owe me a thank you. I think
Oh, okay. So
everything that happened after that, I think, is because of me.
my tweet saying that this tournament was always going to get better as it goes on, that doesn't mean anything. Okay, got it.
But I initiated the embetterment of
You
the
jinxed
tournament
it.
from
You
there.
jinxed it. Yeah, sure. Um,
Yeah.
but it was. We're gonna start with um, the recap of the games, and then we'll get into more of the offseason stuff, coaching stuff. But it delivered. This was one of the best Final Fours of all time. We kind of thought it would be, but after some lackluster early rounds, maybe we were kind of doubting what would happen. Um, this all four one seeds was incredible. So just to start it off with the Final Four recap here, Greg. Florida is down early against Auburn. They are down by 8 at the half. And then they've done what they've done a couple times this tournament where Walter Clayton turns it on in the second half, makes some incredible shots, takes some questionable ones as well, but finishes with 34 points. Elijah Martin has 17 points. Specifically, Elijah Martin has a pretty big dunk that turns the tide for I almost said Alabama Crimson Tide. Wow, that'd been wrong. For Florida, and really puts them in the driver's seat for this game. They end up winning. It looked like their defense was pretty bad in the first half, specifically on Janai Broom, but it looked like they got that figured out in the second half. That rotation of bodies really did bother Janai Broom, as did his injury. So Florida is able to win the first game in this Final Four. Greg, any thoughts about this game before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, it just kind of got to the point with Elijah Martin where I started thinking every time he gets the ball anywhere near the paint, the elbow, and has forward momentum, I thought he's going to dunk it. Like there was even, don't want to just jump games, but there was even a time last night watching the title game where I was like, oh, in that split second that he got the ball and he had his motion going towards basket, oh, he's going to dunk it. He this was Walter Clayton. He definitely is owed his laurels and whatnot. But there was it was a pretty big team effort. And Joe, I remember saying this. I feel like several times. The credit goes to you because you picked Florida. Joe picked Florida to win the whole thing, so the credit goes to him. But I remember sitting at our tournament show saying, when I really think about it and the depth that this team has, and they have an elite player and they play both sides of the ball, I really thought, hey, I do like that. I do like that pick. And I'm not sure that, like, in this game in particular, that there's, I feel like the things that stick out are the Elijah Martin dunk. I can't remember when the Thomas Haw, there was like an and one that he flipped up. I feel like that was late in the game too. But still, even though Walter Clayton went off this game, it still felt like a total team effort. They're down. I think it was 8 at half, and it really felt like Auburn was in control. And they just, as they've been doing throughout this tournament, be it against whoever, they just found a way to make second half adjustments and get back into the game and hang around and then finish them off. This one didn't even really go down to the final buzzer. They kind of had it done with about 15 seconds to go. So
That they did. Greg, just kind of wrapping up Auburn season, best regular season they've had in program history. There was a tweet out there that, oh, this tournament means nothing. No, it means everything. So it sucks. You can still have good memories of the season, but no, you're not a regular season national champion. That's not a thing. So that guy can get out of here. Also, Chad Baker Mazzara is coming back next year, Greg. He will be 26 during next season, so he will be closer in age to 33-year-old people, which we are not 33 yet, but he'll be closer in age to people older than us. We've been out of college for almost 10 years now, coming up here in a month or so. So that is crazy that he'll be closer in age to them than some of the incoming freshmen. So Auburn will likely be back to Hod Pettiford, too, just wrapping up the news. Initially said he was coming back in a, I guess, pep rally or a press conference at Auburn. I don't know exactly what it was. And then said, I'm declaring for the draft. But if I do come back, I'm coming back to Auburn. So Auburn feels like they might have a good core nucleus to build around again next year when, honestly, heading into the Final Four weekend, it looked like it might be almost everyone gone. So Auburn has a lot to think about this offseason and kind of get back to where possibly they were this season. Next game up, Greg. Houston wins 70 to 67. It looked like Duke had this game, Greg. It was 11-point lead with like 7 or 8 minutes left, and then they had a steady 7 to 8 point lead all the way pretty much up until the last 2 minutes, and it got even worse. Like it was under a minute, and they had a 6 point lead after Concanipple made a free throw with a 114 left. Then Emmanuel Sharp, the guy that you mentioned on Twitter, has the utmost confidence, hits a big three. Duke is now leading by three. And it was absolutely a disaster class after that. They didn't have a field goal in the last 3 minutes. I think they don't have a rebound in the last 2 minutes or so. Um, they have Sion James having terrible times inbounding the ball. He may have been concussed too because his head hit the ground on one play too. They have Tyrese Proctor getting the ball as a 68% free throw shooter instead of passing to Cooper Flag or someone else to hit some free throws. That made it close. We had a JoJo Tugler technical foul as well, and Houston was able to overcome that. And they get the ball. JoJo Tugler made a tip shot to put it at 66-67. Tyrese Proctor missed that free throw when Duke was up one. And then Juwan Roberts, who's also not the greatest free throw shooter, makes two free throws, shows his veteran leadership and toughness, and all the stories about Houston shooting 150 free throws per game come out. And then Houston's able to hang on. Also, there needs to be some criticism on that last play again. We talked about this with the Kentucky game, Greg. John Shire didn't draw anything up. It was a Cooper Flag ISO ball. You know, maybe they thought there was a mismatch with Juwan Roberts, but like he just kind of dances and spins around and kind of gets like a semi-contested mid-range jumper. I'm not sure that's exactly what you wanted. And then Houston gets the win. They take advantage of this meltdown by Duke. So, Greg, a couple questions for you here. One, what would you have done differently if you were John Shire? Two, how much do you think not having a true point guard really limited this team? Because in my estimation, that's kind of what cost him with Sion James inbounding the ball, with Tyrese Proctor going and being aggressive and getting the ball and then missing his free throw. I think there needs to be better veteran point guard leadership if you want to win a national championship to set the team up for success better, whether it is the point guard inbounding the ball for Sion James or getting the ball and taking the free throws for Tyrese Proctor.
Yeah, Joey, I'll answer your second question first. I think we may mention early in the year of um, the guard play from Duke, and they have good athletes, good scorers, but maybe not the best distributors, and that's something that might really help. They have guys that can create, but you need someone to kind of run the show. Because anything like that is anybody that's got that ability to distribute, especially against a Houston defense that is going to attack, and blitz. If you could pass out of those double teams, those aggressive defensive schemes, you really have an advantage once you get past that. Really helps on offense. Not that any of these guys can't pass the ball. It's just having someone really at a true point guard would be helpful for that. So I think it's not something new to us. It's something we've been saying. They were going to need better guard play. And granted, I think what we talked earlier, Tyrese Proctor wasn't as dynamic a scorer as he was earlier in the year, but he came along. His shooting came along later in the year, and that really helped them, get to the next level. This Duke team did come a long way, right? Even it's weird because they were definitely one of the front runners to win the whole thing, but they still had a lot of progression. But then there's things that didn't progress, and that kind of leads to the second question you asked, Joe. We had this conversation before about a game once or twice before this. Help me remember. I can't remember if it was the Kansas game or the Kentucky game. There was another Cooper Flag ending, and he actually spun away from the lane and didn't even get a shot that time. So I guess that's progress and improvement. We got a shot. It's a 1 point game, and he spins into the lane, but the ISO maybe isn't the best choice. I mean, like, everybody on this Houston team, first of all, they switch. Second of all, they play smaller. Like their guards aren't, or their bigs aren't, the biggest, so they're a little lighter on their feet. I don't know that saying, hey, ISO is the way to go. I mean, like, there's a couple of ways that you could have done this. I just feel like we've seen this movie before. I don't know why John Shire went to do the exact same thing we've already seen. And you know what? To be fair, like, he got a decent shot off. He's got that ability to rise up over a defender. It was just short. I still think even if he makes it, it's not like we're sitting here saying great. Like, no one is sitting here saying what play design by John. It's not like the Houston Purdue where it's like, wow, there were multiple options, and look what Kelvin Sampson drew up, and look at the position he put his team in. It would have been Cooper Flag finishing despite the situation that they were put in. And the narrative outside of this podcast might have been different. Oh, blah, blah, blah. But, like, we've already seen this before. Not that he can't make that shot. Not that it's a shot he shouldn't have taken once he got where he got to. But you got to come up with something better than that for a shot to take the lead.
Yeah, so we did see this before, Greg. They've had, I think this was like maybe their fourth really close game where they had a chance to take the lead in like the final minute or so. There was a Kentucky game where Cooper Flag spun to the middle. Otega Owe read it, but he wasn't looking, so he stole the ball. There, I think, was another Cooper Flag ISO. I don't know if it was Clemson or
Wasn't it
Kansas.
I believe it was the Kansas game. He
Well,
spun away from the lane and he just lost the ball.
and I think maybe that was it. And then maybe it was the Clemson game where they gave it to Con Knipple, and there was also just not a great shot. So this is like also a product of the ACC being bad. They didn't play in a lot of close games, and that kind of hurt them in the end. But going back to that, instead of, Cooper Flag is an incredible player. He's being the number one pick, but I'm not sure I would have drawn up an ISO play for him. I would have maybe gotten him the ball in the post, let him, if he gets doubled, kind of see the floor and pass out of it because he is an incredible passer. But they have too much talent for that to be the final play when it's not like he is a guy who's going to like leave you in your shoes and get wide open for a shot. It's not like he's got the best handles, very good handles for his size, but for Houston's defense, he's not going to get like the cleanest look, and he didn't. Like he got a semi-clean look, but I just think there could have been something different there too. So lots of conversations this offseason for Duke about point guard spot, about John Shire's X's and O's. Like if we're gonna say Greg and I don't say this, but John Calipari just rolls the balls out and let him play. I mean that meltdown might have people saying the same thing. And I think it's fair if you do say that to say that about him. They have to figure that out, and maybe like roster construction as well. Like they let Jeremy Roach walk, and for everything in my understanding, Greg is like, oh, well, we have Caleb Foster, we have Tyrese Proctor, we have Con Knipple coming in. Don't really need you. Not that he had the best season, but maybe that would have helped having Jeremy Roach in that last minute there. Like it's. I think it's a little bit a lot of conversations to be had with Duke this offseason because I do think they probably had the most talent out of anyone in the tournament. And
Joe, just when you were listing off names, lots of scorers, not a lot of distributors. Isaiah Evans can score. Caleb Foster can score.
mm-hmm.
Tyrese Proctor can score.
Yeah.
Sion James was the closest thing they had to a distributor, and that's really not his primary function.
I'll one up you. Cooper Flag was the best distributor for something assists per game, but and maybe that's why they wanted the ball in his hands. But again, just having him have to drive or even go to the baseline is just I don't know.
He's an elite playmaker, not an elite shot creator, right?
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. So that again, just a lot to figure out. It's going to be again a lot of Duke's to be fine. They have a very good recruiting class coming in. They have NIL money to spend. They're a little bit behind on the portal right now, but they'll figure it out. But I think we just talked about how Auburn wrapped up their season and what they've got coming back. Duke has a little bit more work. if you're going to be saying like, oh, they're going to win the national championship. They're still like top 3 or 4 in national title odds because of that recruiting class and because I think people figure they're going to get it figured out. But we could be sitting here in a month, Greg, and be like, oh, okay, they've got X players from these teams coming in, and it looks better. But right now, a lot to be figured out.
Joe, the only thing we didn't mention was the Cooper flag over the back.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously a horrible call, but everyone's saying that that's the reason they lost. It's not. It contributed. It was a contributing factor, but the missed front ends of 1-and-1s, the inability to get the ball in, that I mean, there were multiple things that contributed. That was a terrible call. Horrendous call. That is not why they were gifted a technical free throw from JoJo
Yeah,
Tugler, as you mentioned. Still
yeah.
couldn't finish the game out.
Hockenep,
They didn't just tie the game, they lost in regulation. I mean, this is insanity.
yeah, Con Knipple kicked the ball out of bounds, and it was out on him, and they gave it to Duke,
Correct.
and that
Yep.
was weird. So
Yep.
there's definitely it goes both ways, and for a program like Duke that tends to get a lot of calls, unless you're Seth Davis and are drinking the Duke Kool Aid, I don't think you can complain about this one, and especially because your players could have done better, and your coach could have done better to set you up to get this win. So a lot of things to think about for Duke next season. Now, Greg, I'm going to talk for a bit because we're previewing the recapping the national championship. And man, it was a tale of two halves. There was a lot that went on. I will try to get as concise as possible. But we start off in this game, Greg. Florida and Houston started 0 of 13 combined from three. And you're thinking, what happened? Are the balls overinflated like everyone's talking? Did they change the rims from Final Four Saturday till now? Um, there was a lot of miscues early. It was an ugly game. It played right into Houston's hands. It was a loose whistle. They let a lot of things go. Uh, Houston got a lot of offensive rebounds. Sometimes could convert, sometimes couldn't. Florida was running the floor, specifically Alex Condon, and getting open looks at the basket because Houston's defense wasn't set. We had Alex Condon with the yips. I believe it was 3 first-half travels. Um, he did rebound and play pretty well after that point. But then we have kind of it settles down a little bit. Houston takes a little bit of a lead. Will Richard keeps Florida in the game with his threes. And we get to a point where, yeah, at some point Houston was up by 10 points, but Florida starts building this momentum. In the second half, they actually start their rally to come back. When Walter Clayton's on the bench, I think Denzel Aberdeen had some very good minutes. He only had 7 points, but I think he was one of the better players on the floor for Florida. And they start that comeback, and it kind of is helped by the whistle. It felt like if you were designing this game, it's like, hey, the first half the refs called it like Houston wants it to be called. The second half they called it like Florida wants to be called, and Florida took advantage. There was a lot going on. Florida ends up making this incredible comeback, and at the end of the game, with Walter Clayton finally turning it on after he had a very rough first half, which understandable against Houston's defense. He makes a three to tie it at 60 points. JoJo Tugler puts him up by one with a free throw. Just kind of keep on going down here. Elijah Martin made 2 free throws to make it 64-63 with 46 seconds remaining. A lot of other stuff happens there. And then Denzel Aberdeen makes another free throw to make it 65-63. And then Houston gets the last possession here. Florida had an insanely good defensive possession that honestly reminded me a lot of Houston's defense, Greg, where they made Houston catch the ball so far away from the basket and so far away from where they wanted to catch it. LJ Cryer caught it on the wing. They passed it over to Emmanuel Sharp. He jumps like he's going to shoot, but then he sees Walter Clayton flying through the air and honestly made up a lot of ground you didn't think he could make up. Puts the ball on the ground. A lot of people say he could have picked it up and it wouldn't have been a travel. I think even optically, there's some gray area there with the rule, but even optically, they were going to call a travel if he picked that one up. So I don't want to blame Emmanuel Sharp. I probably would have let that ball go too and hope a teammate can get it. So Walter Clayton contests the shot. Emmanuel Sharp would have traveled. The ball goes on the ground, rolls out for a national championship win for Florida in a game that was exciting, fitting for the end of this season. Florida kind of won playing Houston's way with that good defense, and I don't know what else to say, Greg. It was kind of a meltdown by Houston, but also just like a changing landscape of the game because the officiating was so different from half to half.
Well, here's the other thing, Joe. This was I don't know that I necessarily had this thought last night, but I have it today. So I don't want to take credit and say like, "Oh, this is something I noticed in the moment and this is how I knew Florida." But just kind of last night, obviously in both of our heads, hey, the first half was officiated more of a favorably to Houston. And then I like sitting here now, I'm realizing it was only a 3-point game at halftime.
Hmm.
Like it was Houston ball. It was their type of game. And then I did notice last night when Florida started coming back, I can't take credit because I didn't tweet this, but I did start kind of thinking Houston's taking some quick shots. I don't know. Like, yes, the game was being officiated differently. I don't know if playing Florida ball, if playing that type of tempo, that type of pace, if playing their game is a good way to close out the game. They kind of poke and prod and take these long possessions. And then, at the end, they get a little doinker under the basket of Bunny. Sometimes they kick out and LJ Cryer hits a nice three. But they really are methodical on offense. And they just at times weren't. And I'm not saying that some of these players shouldn't take initiative between Emmanuel Sharp and LJ Cryer and Milo Suzan. Like these guys can shoot and they can score. And sometimes you're gonna those opportunities are gonna be there, but it just seemed like, and part of it is due to the officiating. Joe already mentioned the officiating really changed in the second half, and it's sad that that's kind of got to be part of the story, but it really was a major contributing factor. I'm not saying it's the reason Florida won. They still had to make shots regardless of how the game was officiated. But I mean, don't forget that Houston was in the bonus. When were they in the bonus, Joe? In the second half, like forever and a day. There was like 14 minutes on the clock, and Houston was in the
Uh-huh.
bonus. Like
Yep.
it's not like the different game call just benefited Florida. Like there were a lot more fouls called, but Houston had the opportunity to get the line. Here's the thing that surprises me most, Joe. Looking at the stats, 40-39 rebounding advantage for Florida. Did not feel like that.
Nope.
Did not feel like that. And there was a pretty big disparity on offensive rebounds. So I think that's the biggest visual of what we were seeing. Just Houston just getting a finger on it, and felt like every possession, every shot, they'd get. But the other thing, Joe, is like I said this at halftime. They had like 7 offensive rebounds in the first half, and they had 0 second chance points. Like that,
Hmm.
that is kind of like one of those things where like it's like, okay, the game literally went, in the way they would want it to in terms of tempo and type, and they still were only up 3. Not at all. So I honestly, from the first about at the under 16 timeout in the first half, I said Houston's winning this game. I felt like they were there. Florida seemed out of sorts between Condon and Clayton, just couldn't get it going. Now, Clayton could have get it going, and I know you talked for a while, and I don't want to
Hey,
just keep rambling. But the
you go.
one
You
thing
go.
I did notice last night, yes, Clayton had trouble getting the motor started on scoring. Finishes with 11 points, still finishes in double digits. But I don't know. I don't know if you know how many assists he had at halftime, but it must have been at least 4 or 5. And he was a big contributing factor in those outlet passes, and Florida really trying to get out and score in transition before that Houston defense could get set. And that's one of the reasons that it was only a 3-point game at halftime. Hey, all right. It was their game in the first half. We're only down 3, and he stayed. It's not quite that. I did have. It's not really anything. I don't want to say it's too similar, but that Anthony Davis title game kept going through my head where he had that conversation with the guys in the locker room where he's like, "Hey guys, I just can't score tonight. I'm going to do everything else." And that was kind of what was going through my head. Again, it's a different situation, but just Walter Clayton was staying involved, right? Buckets are not going in. He didn't have his first field goal until like midway through the second half, but he was staying involved. He was doing other things. And lo and behold, it comes down to the final play. And what happens? He makes a closeout from, darn near the elbow to an NBA 3. And there's a picture I'm sure you've seen. I think No Context Basketball posted like obviously, a still image doesn't tell you everything, but you could see Emmanuel Sharp is getting ready to shoot, and you can see where Walter Clayton is. And it's insanity. And the defensive play prevents, he didn't even block it. The only thing in my head is, man, if he'd have just pumped it, I would have liked to see the ball in the air, get that everybody, the whole stadium is frozen in time. What's going to happen?
Mhm.
I'm fine with the play. I heard some people saying I can't believe they came up with that crap for their last play. I mean they pretty much got an open shot. It just Walter Clayton made a ridiculous recovery. I mean, I'm probably going to watch that play again over the next couple of weeks to just see the minute details of it, because that should have been an open shot and they had a chance to win the game. I don't know if there's the one thing I want to ask you, Joe. I'll bring it to a wrap. Do you agree with the let's go for the win? Because they had zero intention of getting a 2 and tying the game. They had no intention of that whatsoever. There was no effort to get the ball inside. For a team that had done so well on the offensive rebounding, I don't know if I buy that. Like, you're going away from your strength and just saying, hey, for this one possession, we're going to chuck up a 3, and that's what we're leaving the title on. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it makes sense. I would have done things differently, but I understand it. They were getting into foul trouble. JoJo Tugler had already fouled out. Florida had all the momentum, if you believe in such things. And yeah, it would have been tough to close out in overtime. So I like it. I like that they tried to get Emmanuel Sharp, who always has confidence in the shot, in the sense of, I don't know. I think I may have rather gone with LJ Cryer. Like we talked about, Cooper Flag's not the best ISO ball guy. I think LJ Cryer could have created his own shot, and I would have loved to have it in his hands. He's been on the big stage. He did go 6 of 18 in this game. I just like it's not the worst idea to go Emmanuel Sharp and have Cryer set it up, but I don't know. I think that would be something I might do different. Is like let's give the ball to LJ Cryer, the only Houston player with double digit points. He finished with 19, so I don't have a huge problem going for the win given the situation, but it could have easily been, hey, everyone else clear out. LJ Cryer try to get an open shot. We have Roberts and Francis underneath trying to get putbacks after you shoot the ball with 5, 6 seconds, whatever it is, 4 or 5 seconds, and that could have been better too. So that may be how I would have done it, Greg. All right, so to kind of recap this, Greg, we are 2 for 2 on picking national champions on the show. You picked last year UConn. I picked Florida this year. We have, I think, a worthy champion, a champion that can say that they were the best team this season, even though a lot of the talk was Auburn Duke. If you're a 1 seed and you all the Final Four is all 1 seeds, I think you can claim it that you're the best team this season. We talked a lot about marches for guards, Greg, and I do think that has something to do with it. Walter Clayton stepped up in so many big games. You mentioned how he affected the game in more than just one way. But when he didn't have it going first half, Will Richard stepped up, and Elijah Martin had a big game in the Final Four before the national championship game, and Denzel Aberdeen had some really big minutes. So those guards matter. Duke did not have that go to guard play for the Final Four, and I think that's something we'll have to keep note of. Florida did have those bigs that they could rotate in, and that's huge. But man, when you have that many good guards, that is going to mean a whole hell of a lot.
Joe, that's the only other thing I wanted to add. Yes, it's marches for guards, but that rotating class of Ha and Condon and Ham Logden, who burned his red shirt to come back. Juwan Roberts was uncomfortable, and he did not finish shots that he normally finishes. Yes, the guards are the premier, and a lot of them are going to be, especially in the NBA, that's what makes you big money is the scoring guards. But like we said it, well, I'll say more. You said it. The team was complete. It was deep. It wasn't just reliant on one thing, because I think sometimes we see some of these teams that are just guard reliant and they kind of throw a big body out there. But every single one of those guys that played underneath can play, right? All of their big guys can play. And, again, some uncharacteristic things from Condon in the first half, but I really noticed how uncomfortable Juwan Roberts got. He finishes the game with 8 points, 3 of 13 from the field. And like numbers aside, there were just some shots that like I'm just like that normally goes in for him. Over the last couple of years, that goes in for him. And it was just that little bit of discomfort. You already mentioned Tugler goes out with his fouls, and Francis had foul trouble. So for a long time, it was kind of, they were playing small ball. It was pretty much Roberts and 4 guards out there. And like that has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. So I think, things I'll be looking for next year, Joe, just, kind of big picture when we're looking at who's going to be good, who's who's got a shot at winning the title, it's going to be looking at complete teams, looking at depth. And I know I'm spitballing something that Rothstein says, but I really do believe retention matters. And I'm not saying like you gotta have dudes, like it doesn't have to be Purdue. Like we've got 9 dudes that played at Purdue last year. I don't mean that, but like there's got to be some form of continuity. I think that's helpful. I don't think it's the end all be all, but next year when I'm sitting down and looking at my bracket, I think it's not a math equation, it's not a science experiment, but those are kind of the things that I'm going to look out for and say, yeah, okay, they've got a little bit of this and they've got a little bit of that. Those are kind of my key elements to a team I think that can win the title.
Yeah, definitely. And to kind of go back to the point of like, yeah, this was a team I thought had it with the guards and the bigs that could rotate in. I think they asked Auburn after the game, like, what does this Florida team remind you of? You've played them twice now. You obviously lost twice. And they were like, this is a Texas A&M team, but bigger. And that's exactly what I said it would take to beat Auburn was a team that had talented guards, but bigs they could just throw at Janai Broom. And maybe it'll change next year in a sense of like, maybe having a bunch of bigs won't be the answer because there won't be maybe the post presence isn't as good in college basketball. We had a lot of good post players this year. And I would say maybe the guard's a little bit underwhelming. I don't know. I don't want to say that, but it's hard when your two National Player of the Year candidates are both big guys, and it looks like Walter Clayton's overshadowed all year. But it's just something to note. It's like, hey, this was they had that roster that we saw, and I liked because of that, and it ended up working out for those reasons pretty much in this last game. Next year might be different, but it is something to look forward to next year. And what a season by Walter Clayton, 0-star recruit, and he gets the national championship. He develops at Iona, transfers here. The no 5-star in this game, Greg. There is no freshman playing in this game. So there is a little bit of a note of how you build your roster. I don't think it's like, hey, you shouldn't have 5 stars, you shouldn't have freshmen, but I think your point about retention is right. It doesn't have to be your stars. If you bring back 1 or 2 starters and 2 or 3 bench players, that's what Houston might be like next year. So that might be good enough. And Houston's getting ranked number 1 by a lot of people right now. So retention does matter in that regard, and that is something we will track this offseason as well, because there are going to be teams like Houston that you're not going to bring back all 5 starters. That those times might be over. But if you can bring back 2 or 3 key players, maybe 1 or 2 bench guys, you're sitting pretty for this era of college basketball. All right, Greg, that's the national championship. We have some coach hirings to go over here. Uh, Let's start it off with West Virginia hiring Ross Hodge, the North Texas coach, to take over for Darian DeVries. Now, they took a while to hire him. I don't think he's a bad coach whatsoever. I think it's another could be successful guy, but it's not like you have like a huge stamp of approval for him. Um, but it did shock me that it took them so long to make a move. They knew DeVries was gone for kind of weeks before they actually made this hire.
Yeah, it looks like North Texas might become a coaching factory, kind of like Utah State, because you look at where Ross Hodge has a job now at a big program, and not right down the road, but in the same conference is the previous North Texas coach Grant Castlin. So um, I am fine with this, but I still think I don't know if you're going to have thoughts on any of the other coaches we're about to talk about, but I think this kind of fits in with the theme, like a bunch of B hires. Nothing wrong
Yeah,
with it.
yeah.
Don't have a problem with it. Don't think it's a home run.
Right. It's just we talked about there's not a lot of available big mid major coaches or even like lower power 5 coaches who are moving up to these big jobs that were like, oh, that's like it. But I think this one could work. There hasn't been too many I haven't understood it in the coaching world besides Mike Bibby going to Sacramento State, which is a whole story in and of itself. But you're right. I don't have too much to add to this one. I think it could work out, but I was surprised about how late it was. The next one, Greg. Let's start it off with the domino here. We're gonna have Kevin Willard leave Maryland for Villanova. I think we may have mentioned that part last week, but just to kind of recap that he officially took the job. There was a lot of talk about Maryland's NIL. They had 5 really good players, the Crab Five this year. He wanted more. He goes to Villanova. Revenue sharing will be a thing next year, so Big East teams are expected to have more money to contribute to basketball, while other places like Maryland have pretty much said they're going to give more of their revenue share to football. Well, Villanova has an FCS football team. They're not really going to care about that as much. So he kind of makes the move and kind of gets vilified by Maryland. But there's also a sense of, we talked about this last week, I'm pretty sure now, but like, hey, he got out because the AD who hired him was gone, because of NIL, because of how the revenue sharing was going to go. And now he gets to Villanova where you may not have as much NIL, but if you have 10-ish million to build a roster from revenue sharing, that's going to get the job done.
Just can't wait to see Maryland go from what they were with the Crab Five this year to next year being some sort of gritty defensive 9 deep team under Buzz Williams. It's just going to be a straight mirror opposite of what they were this year.
Yeah, so to your point, Greg, Maryland goes and hires Buzz Williams. He has said in the past that like he only wants to stay at a job for 6 or 7 years because you do the work of turning it around, and once you get to a level that is, I would say, up to par, up to what you feel like it should be, everyone raises the bar on you after you've turned them around from being like a last place team into like a middle of the pack team or a top tier team. And he doesn't want to get fired. He said he's done studies and like it is best to move around every 6 or 7 years after you finish the rebuild job because they will fire you if you have a bad year instead of saying, hey, when he took the job, this was a bad job. Now it's actually gotten better. So he takes the Maryland job, all knowing that the revenue share might be similar to Texas A&M, where like a lot of it goes to football, the way things are sitting right now, but has a chance to kind of get a fresh start. A lot of his players were not going to be back next season, but he takes the Maryland job, and for those reasons we just mentioned, a lot of people said that's kind of like a loser mentality, but he's right. Like if you don't think you can reach another level with Texas A&M, which is a very good season, then move on, set up shop somewhere new, have a chance to kind of build them back up because obviously they're not going to be Sweet 16 ready next year, although they do have Pharrell Payne coming in with him from Texas A&M. So thoughts on Buzz Williams to Maryland, Greg?
Seeing that in the Big Ten, I'm just already thinking about all the matchups that I'm going to thoroughly enjoy watching next year. This is one that I feel like is going to work out. So if I'm keeping tabs on, hey, yeah, we got a bunch of B hires, but kind of my list of guys that I think it's going to work out for. I think it's going to work out for Will Wade. I think it's going to work out for Ben McCollum, and I think it's going to work out for Buzz Williams. And to be fair, Joe, just kind of like what you said, he turned, he gave Texas A&M some new life, but they still kind of underachieved a little bit this year, or it was roller coastery and rocky. So maybe it was just time for him, regardless of his philosophy and how he wants to job shop and whatnot. That aside, it may have just been, hey, it's time for new scenery because, the last, he restarts the clock a little bit. Not that I think he was anywhere near a hot seat, but it's just kind of freshen things up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what he's trying to do here, and see what he does with Maryland. Again, I'm with you. I think it should work out, but this might be more honestly. The B hires might be more of a product of what resources they get given this new era of college basketball, how much NIL they have to use, how much rev share money they have to use, and might see good coaches not be successful if teams don't divvy up the rev share the right way or don't have the NIL structure to kind of build the right team. So we'll see how he does, but he has a good start to his roster with Pharrell Payne going with him to Maryland. All right, next one, the last one we have to talk about tonight, Greg. Texas A&M hires Bucky McMillan. They'll be playing Bucky ball at Texas A&M. There was rumors it was going to be Chris Beard. Chris Beard was rumored to want out, possibly go to a blue blood job or a bigger job than Ole Miss, especially because a lot of his roster was leaving. There were some other people thrown out that like could have taken the job, but they end up going Bucky McMillan. We mentioned not a lot of great low to mid major coaches that had made their presence felt this year, but he does have some experience. Don't remember, he had a very good Sanford team last year.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go with this, Joe. They are a very, very poor call late in that game against Kansas in the tournament last year from beating them. I think most people had Sanford picked in that game. I know I did. I can't remember if you did. Felt a little cheated with the. It was one of those plays where I can't remember who it was from Kansas because it's been 2 years at this point. But somebody was going to the hoop on a breakaway, and the Samford player was trailing and got a hand on it, and the Kansas player's body went forward just because of momentum. It wasn't a foul, but it got called. So I don't this one. I mean, it's just fun. It's different, but
Yeah.
like still not anything that sticks out huge to me. From you know just just about where I have all the other ones, besides kind of the three that I've mentioned that I believe in. Not that I think any. I mean, odds are a couple of these guys are going to flame out. Like that's just how it works, right?
Mhm.
It just they're everybody can't be good every year. So a couple of these guys that are getting hired this year are going to flame out. But I
Yeah.
don't have any gut feelings about most of these guys, except that I think it's going to work for the three guys that I mentioned. This I don't. It could work for Bucky. It could not work, but I still think it's going to be fun.
Brother, you ain't lying. We have had two NBA coaches that are very successful right now. Top four seeds in the West. We had the Memphis coach fired, and we had Mike Malone of the Nuggets get fired after winning the championship a couple of years ago. So not everyone can be successful. The bar can be raised, expectations can be changed, so many different things happen. So these will not all be successful. And it is, our duty to say, hey, there's a lot of B hires, but a lot of them won't work out. So if you're seeing coaching grades where everyone's giving them Bs, that's probably not the right way to go about it, even though there are a lot of Bs and we just don't know. There has to be some Fs that come out of this too. And that's just how the nature of competitive business works. For Bucky, though, we'll say when he took the Sanford job, his first season won 6 games, and then the next four seasons won 20 games in each season. He won the regular season championship in the Southern Conference twice. He once won the conference tournament and then made that NCAA tournament last year, Greg. So if you're thinking about a guy who can definitely turn it around and knows how to build rosters, especially with limited budgets, he is a guy that can do that. And again, don't know how much NIL Texas A&M basketball is going to have. Don't know how much rev share they're going to get in comparison to how big the football is. We know they want to be successful in football. We don't know how successful they want to be in basketball. So we will see how that all comes in. But it might be the good hire for a good spot because he can work with limited resources. And he's may have better resources than he had at Stanford, but it's still going to be imbalanced in terms of football and basketball.
So here, I don't know that I have an answer to this in my head, but I feel like these timelines aren't quite like what NBA coaches, because I feel like didn't this happen to the Bucks head coach like 2 years ago, where they were just coming off winning the title, and they fired, I can't even remember who it was, but the timeline on college basketball coaches has also kind of been sped up. It used to kind of be like you come in and, hey, we're going to build something, and now just with all the variables that we've talked about ad nauseum, it's a little bit of a faster time frame for when success is expected. I mean, it was historically bad, but look at what happened to Kenny Payne. I mean, that
Yeah.
out literally middle of second season. Here's my question, Joe. Let's just talk power conferences.
Mhm.
One of these guys is getting fired 2 years from now. I'm not saying it will or it won't, but if you had to put your money, one of these power coaches is getting fired 2 years from now. Who is it? You got $100. You get even odds. I don't know who do you pick?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Within 2 years, I think you either have to do historically bad or you have to have a administration that is not okay with losing, right? So I'm going to say these guys, none of them are historically bad enough to get fired after 2 years. It has been sped up. You're right. You used to get 5 years because the first recruiting class wasn't your best. You didn't have a full time to actually recruit, full session to recruit them. The next recruiting class is the first full one, so you get 4 recruiting classes. This is tough. I would say out of all of them, I would say maybe DeVries at Indiana because of the expectation. If it doesn't go well, that could happen. Now, I don't think it's going to happen because of that. If they use the NIL money that they say they have, then I think it's a very good chance it does happen. But if you're saying get fired in 2 years, that might be the guy. I could see Nico Medved having troubles at Minnesota just because it's a job that seems like it doesn't have as much resources as well. So those are the two guys I would kind of point out of like one, hey, this fan base is kind of crazy, both good and bad. they might have high expectations. If you miss the tournament next year, they might be starting to call for your job, even though it's your first year. And then for Medved, it might be more of a hey uphill battle coaching at Minnesota. I don't know if you had an answer to that question as well,
I
but here you go.
I situationally was wondering if it might be Nico Medved, not because I think he's a bad coach or anything. Obviously, he's done wonderful things at Colorado State, but I just don't know if Minnesota in general, in terms of longevity, is equipped for long term. Like think about when PJ Fleck got at Minnesota, and it was the next best thing, and like dude just kind of sat there for years now. Like I just don't know if Minnesota athletics is a sustainable. That's a big thought question, but I mean the only other one, like I just wonder if with the money Miami shells out, if Jai Lucas, if he doesn't have success immediately, if that's one that just again, they were super patient with Larinaga, because obviously he had his ups and his downs, and yes, he went to the Final Four, but still, it got pretty bad at times. I just wonder if because they were kind of the first to shell out money for Nigel Pack when this whole thing started, who was back in the transfer portal, and that makes me laugh that the dude was enrolled in college in 2020 is still playing basketball, but that's another thing. Um, I just wonder if now that it's more about the money, if that situationally might just be one of those things where it's like you better figure it out quick.
And not just the money, but you're in a conference that hasn't been good. So theoretically, unless there's some big change, yeah, should you be one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the conference next year, even in your first year? Probably. Do you get probably one more year to prove that after that? He probably gets 2 years, but you need to be in the top 4 or 5 if you have that much money floating around it, and you got hired mid-season from Duke and you didn't finish out the season with Duke. There's a lot more pressure on you because of that too. So I like your answer as well. We'll see how it all plays out there. Greg, any final thoughts on college basketball coaching changes this season? Anything you got?
Um, as a a top down kind of thought, it's early. We'll probably have a few off season podcasts, maybe some fun stuff. I think we might do maybe once a month, and obviously we'll do some news stuff. Hey, this committed, this whatever. I'm talking months before we do like team previews or anything, but I have kind of started thinking the SEC has a historic year this year. Louisville's obviously making some waves in the transfer portal, and again, it is early. The portal doesn't even close until April 22nd. For guys to enter their name in. So there could still be big names that both enter and commit. But I'm just wondering if hopefully we get a little bit more. ACC is better. We get a little bit more. Obviously the Big East might be hurt by Sean Miller leaving, but maybe Richard Pitino can keep some stuff going. I don't know. Do you think that the landscape next year, because I mean, a lot of this is where's the money, and that's in the SEC and the Big Ten. But we just saw an SEC and a Big 12 team, and the one of the other teams in the Final Four was an ACC team. Granted, they're one of the premier programs in college basketball. I just don't know if you think, because a lot of people are starting to say, oh well, Cinderella's done, and 2 years ago we had Oakland, so I don't think that that's done. But do you think next year we're going to be looking up in mid-January and be like, oh man, it's the SEC and the Big Ten, and the rest of the conferences have a team here, a team there? Do you think things might even out a little bit? What are your initial thoughts?
I think it'll even out because of the rev sharing. The Big East will be better next year. That's at least a start. And then also, there's going to be programs like, say, Syracuse, who've not been great the last couple of years. They're going to probably give more money to basketball than other programs will. And they probably still have NIL money that is more geared towards basketball as well as the rev share. So I think it'll even out. I think we might see more power conference teams than ever have a chance to win it all. This year was like very top heavy, but that was also like COVID year and the transfer portal without revenue sharing. There's I think there might be the most wide open year in terms of who can win it next year. I do have concerns about mid majors and low majors in terms of what they can do to compete. But I will say, Greg, it is basketball. This is not like football where you need a bunch of five stars to win every game. You could have a guy who's under recruited and you can have them be successful. You might have to, have a chance to have that guy stay an extra year or something or to build a roster. But I think there is going to be a way where, hey, what if this guy really develops his 3 point shot over the offseason and becomes one of the best in the country and you have him on your roster? And, that's it's still going to be some upsets in there. This year was, I think, just historically chalky because of that extra year of eligibility. We're still seeing guys like Chad Baker Mazzara have that, so that maybe there'll be a little bit of element to it. But I think long term, Cinderellas will come back. But it might be good for the sport overall when we don't just have, I'd say, I don't know, preseason's always tough these days, but like it feels like next year there's going to be way more teams that have a shot. Like I don't want to. I just don't want to get too far into the weeds of next season yet, but could we see Duke win with all the freshmen next year? Probably. Could we see Houston? Probably. Could we see, Kentucky's putting a good roster together right now? Yes, Louisville, as you mentioned, Purdue, BYU has a chance to have all that NIL money come in, and Igor Denham is, I think, deciding tomorrow whether he's coming back to BYU. So there's
Yeah, I
so
was going
many.
to say, Joe, we haven't even mentioned BYU yet. And granted, they're not like a Cinderella. They're in the
Yeah,
Big 12, but kind of AJ DeMonsa coming in. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
it,
Like it may not look like the past, but it might be better. Like, yeah, it might be a lot more power teams, but it might be better that we have more teams who might be able to win it. And again, maybe this all changes by next month, and like Kansas has a stacked roster, Kentucky has a stacked roster, and it's just blue bloods again. But people are transferring out of those blue bloods too, so I think it's going to be a lot of talent evaluation. Greg, I would love if we do player contracts in the next couple of years once revenue sharing gets going. So you have to buy out players from smaller conferences. So then, hey, here's 60,000 to buy this guy out of his contract. You can go use that and go get some other players from different teams. That will get to a natural point where if you do a good job of developing your players and having them go to bigger programs, you get that money to go keep on building your team up. And that's like maybe a way more of a European soccer type style, but I do think long term, if we get to that point, things will come back with Cinderellas and everything will be fine. All right.
that's it, man.
That's it. All right.
All
So
we got.
I remind everyone we will be trying to do 1 month or one show a month for the off season. Greg mentioned transfer portal ends here in a couple of weeks. We will try to maybe do one in May once things kind of settle. Get our thoughts about any other coaching changes that happen at some point. They can happen pretty late these days. We will get any thoughts on maybe some of the rosters that look better, some of the transfers that are looking pretty good, and what fits might be good. And our goal is to do more, maybe a monthly in the offseason, and then kind of get back to weekly when the season gets picked up. If there's a lot of love on the views and everything, we might tend to do more and figure out a way to do more content this offseason. But for now, that is the plan. I also remind everyone to like and subscribe, especially this time since we may not be back for a while, for another month or so, to wherever you get your podcast, whether the Apple or Spotify. And also make sure to like and subscribe to the Game House YouTube channel. That is where we're hosted on YouTube. That helps us out as we go along. So for now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.